Hello and welcome back to the Canadian Money Roadmap podcast. I'm your host, Evan Neufeld. Today we've come to the end of Season 2, so I'm going to recap this season and highlight each episode and cover off a few things in case you missed any and you want to go back and learn some more. First of all, thanks again so much for listening and sending in your email questions and comments. I respond to all of those emails, by the way, and I really love getting that feedback from you as listeners. I've had a lot of fun doing this podcast, and I hope that it's been valuable for you too. My expectations were pretty limited when I started it last year during the pandemic because everybody else was starting podcasts, and I thought I might just drown into the abyss, but after about 17,000 downloads here at the end of May 2021, I'm absolutely blown away by your response, so thanks again for listening. Okay, getting into the season recap here, we start off with episode number 1, using a TFSA like a pro. And so the main takeaway here is that you want to use your TFSA more like a tax-free retirement account or a tax-free investment account. You want to use it for growth and investing, not parking cash and letting it sit there. Just a reminder that you never have to pay tax if you don't make any money. So if your money is just sitting there in cash, it's not making you any money that you would have had to pay tax on anyways. So you might as well make some money so that you can actually get the benefits of it being tax-free. In episode 2, I was a guest on Matt Ramage's podcast about money and marriage. The biggest takeaway from this episode is that you can have whatever system you like between you and your spouse. You can do things together, you can split it up in whatever system you'd like, but as long as you stick to that system and communicate between you and your spouse, you'll be able to avoid a lot of marital conflict when it comes to money. At the end of the episode, I also cover off some tips for those of you who might be saving up for their own wedding or how to navigate the costs that come along with a wedding, including your parents or other people in sharing those costs with you. Another big purchase came up in episode 3 where I talked to Kendra Sowden about buying a house. She gives us the process for every step of the way when it comes to buying a home and reasons why you might want to consider using a realtor. In episode 4, I jumped back into retirement savings and covered off RRSPs, or Registered Retirement Savings Plans, and why they aren't necessarily the best option for most people's long-term savings. The big takeaway on this one is that if you have income above the middle bracket in your province, here in Saskatchewan, that's about $100,000, that's the threshold where you really start to increase your odds of success when using RSPs. Luke Hergott joined me on episode 5 to give some really actionable advice on how to file your own taxes. The title of this episode is How to File Your Taxes in 2021, but this episode is highly valuable for referencing in future years as well. Episode 6 was back to housing again, where I invited Bud Jorgensen on to give us some info on mortgages specifically, how you can qualify for a mortgage, the types of mortgages available, CMHC insurance, and whether you should actually have 20% down when purchasing your home. Our ESPs, or Registered Education Savings Plans, were next on episode 7. These are great tools for saving for your child's education and, in particular, having the government contribute 20% or more on their behalf. One thing I never mentioned in this episode is that you want to think of the oxygen mask principle when it comes to RESPs. If you think back to the last time you were on an airplane, which for most of us was probably a long time ago, every time they give the oxygen mask demo, they say, please secure your mask before assisting someone else. RESPs are exactly the same way. You want to make sure that you're saving for yourself, your retirement, and your goals before you want to start saving for someone else. I know that can sound a little cold-hearted when you're thinking about perhaps your first child or things like that, but there are a lot of programs that will help kids pay for school, and there are very few programs that will help you pay for your retirement. So again, keep that oxygen mask principle in mind. Okay, episode 8 was where I start my Investing Basics series, and I started by talking about stocks, or equities as we refer to them. Buying stocks is kind of like buying a piece of a business, so when you buy a business, you share in both the good and the bad that comes along with it, so that's the risk factor when buying stocks. Over time, stocks have been a great place to make money, but it's far from certain or guaranteed, especially over the short term. To pair with stocks, the next episode I talked about bonds. Bonds are a little less volatile, but there's less upside potential as a result. Again, that risk and reward trade-off working hand in hand. A bond is essentially a loan where you lend money to a company or a government in exchange for interest over time. And once the term of the bond is up, you can hopefully expect your money back. But if there's a higher risk of you not getting that money back, your interest rate is probably going to be a little bit higher, and that's where you get into things called high-yield bonds. The final episode of this season talked about the easiest way to actually buy stocks and bonds through mutual funds and ETFs. The goal of these two investment vehicles are the same, but there's a few different features and some misconceptions between them that I cover off in the episode. If you're looking for an affordable way to build a diversified portfolio, ETFs and mutual funds might be a good option for you. Thanks one more time for listening to this season of the Canadian Money Roadmap podcast, and I look forward to bringing you more episodes sometime very soon. Thanks for joining me today on the Canadian Money Roadmap podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd really appreciate if you left me a review on Apple Podcasts with your biggest takeaway. If you have questions or ideas for topics you'd like me to discuss on future episodes, please reach out via my contact info in the show notes. This podcast is intended to be educational in nature, and you should always consult your financial, tax, and legal advisors before making changes to your financial plan. Any rates of return discussed are historical or hypothetical and are to be used for educational purposes only. Evan Neufeld is a qualified associate financial planner and registered investment fund advisor. Mutual funds are provided through Sterling Mutuals Inc.